"Keep that disgusting child away from our school," the HOA president screamed at my 8-year-old disabled daughter at the school entrance. "That hideous ramp is ruining our neighborhood." The next morning, someone burned down the school's accessibility ramp. Too bad she didn't know she was confessing to the fire marshal. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. "You need to keep that disgusting child in her wheelchair away from our property line." Margaret Whitfield's shrill voice cut through the morning air like nails on a chalkboard. "This is a respectable neighborhood, not some charity hospital." I had just pulled into Riverside Elementary's parking lot when I witnessed this scene unfolding. The perfectly manicured HOA president was screaming at my 8-year-old daughter Emma, who sat frozen in her wheelchair at the bottom of the school's accessibility ramp, tears streaming down her small face. "Mommy, what did I do wrong?" Emma whispered to my wife Sarah, who was kneeling beside the wheelchair, trying to comfort our terrified daughter. "Nothing, sweetheart. You did absolutely nothing wrong," Sarah replied, her voice shaking with rage as she glared at Margaret. But Margaret wasn't finished with her tantrum. She stood there in her designer suit and perfectly styled hair, pointing an accusatory finger at my innocent daughter like she was some kind of criminal. "That hideous ramp is an eyesore that's destroying our property values. Every time I look out my window, I have to see that monstrosity reminding me that this neighborhood is going downhill." Emma's bottom lip trembled as she tried to understand why this woman was being so mean to her. She was just 8 years old, born with spina bifida, and all she wanted was to go to school like any other child. The ramp wasn't just a convenience for her, it was her lifeline to independence, education, and dignity. Principal Martinez rushed out of the school building, clearly flustered by the commotion. "Mrs. Whitfield, please lower your voice. You're scaring the children." "Good. Maybe they'll finally understand they don't belong here." Margaret snapped back, her face twisted with disgust. "This is supposed to be an elite neighborhood, not a dumping ground for society's problems. I didn't pay premium prices for my house just to have my morning view ruined by wheelchair ramps and special needs children." Other parents dropping off their kids had stopped to stare at the scene. Some looked horrified at Margaret's behavior, while others seemed uncomfortable and hurried their children inside. But nobody stepped forward to defend my daughter, and that made my heart ache even more. That's when my protective father instincts kicked into overdrive. I stepped out of my car and approached the group, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "Ma'am, that's my daughter you're talking about," I said in the calmest voice I could manage, though inside I was seething with rage. Margaret spun around, her cold blue eyes scanning me up and down with obvious disdain. "Oh, so you're the one responsible for bringing this situation into our neighborhood. Well, congratulations on ruining everyone's morning and destroying our property values." Sarah stood up, positioning herself protectively in front of Emma. "How dare you speak about a child that way? Emma has every right to attend school here. She's a straight-A student who's never caused any problems for anyone." "Right?" Margaret laughed cruelly, the sound echoing off the school's brick walls. "The only right I care about is my right to maintain my property values. I've lived in Sunny Meadows for 15 years and this neighborhood used to mean something. Now we've got wheelchair ramps, special parking spaces, and God knows what other accommodations cluttering up the place." Emma's quiet sobs grew louder, and each sound felt like a knife to my heart. This innocent child was being attacked simply for existing, for needing basic accessibility to get an education. "That ramp is an abomination," Margaret continued, her voice rising again. "And if the school won't remove it voluntarily, then maybe it needs to be removed by other means." The threat in her voice was crystal clear. Principal Martinez stepped forward, her face pale with concern. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you threatening to damage school property?" "I'm not threatening anything," Margaret replied with a sly smile that sent chills down my spine. "I'm simply stating that sometimes problems have a way of solving themselves. Accidents happen all the time, especially with old wooden structures like that ramp. A little spark, some dry weather, and whoosh, problem solved." The casual way she talked about potentially destroying my daughter's access to school made my blood boil. This wasn't just about property values or neighborhood aesthetics. This was about a grown woman targeting a disabled child out of pure spite and prejudice. "You listen to me very carefully," I said, stepping closer to Margaret, my voice low and dangerous. "If anything happens to that ramp, if my daughter can't access her school safely, there will be serious consequences." Margaret's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. "Consequences? From who?" "You." She laughed again, that same cruel sound. "What are you going to do, call the police on a respected member of the community?" I own 3 properties in this area, I'm the president of the Sunny Meadows HOA, and my husband is one of the most prominent lawyers in the county. You're nobody. You're just some middle-class parent with a defective child who thinks the world owes you special treatment. The word defective hit me like a physical blow. Sarah gasped audibly and Emma's crying intensified. How could anyone be so heartless, so completely devoid of basic human compassion? We'll see about that, I replied quietly, memorizing every detail of her face and her threats. Margaret smoothed down her designer skirt and checked her expensive watch. Well, this has been educational. But I have important HOA business to attend to. Unlike some people, I have responsibilities to upstanding members of the community. She looked down at Emma with pure disgust. You might want to consider homeschooling. There are plenty of online programs for children with special circumstances. With that final insult, she turned on her heel and strutted back to her silver Mercedes, leaving behind a wake of shocked silence and my daughter's heartbroken tears. Sarah immediately knelt down and hugged Emma tightly. Sweetheart, don't listen to that horrible woman. You belong here just as much as any other child. Daddy and I love you so much and we're never going to let anyone hurt you. But I could see the damage was already done. Emma's confidence was shattered, her joy in going to school dimmed by this woman's cruelty. As I helped Emma up the ramp and into school, I made a silent promise that Margaret Whitfield would pay for what she'd done to my innocent daughter. The next morning I got the call I'd been dreading but somehow expecting. Marshall Johnson, we need you at Riverside Elementary immediately, dispatch crackled through my radio at 6:15 a.m. Structure fire at the school's accessibility ramp. Suspected arson. My heart sank as I drove to the scene with my emergency lights flashing. Margaret had followed through on her threat, just as I'd feared she would. The woman's hatred for my disabled daughter had driven her to commit a serious crime. I arrived to find exactly what Margaret had threatened. The beautiful ramp that our Parent-Teacher Association had worked months to fundraise was now a smoldering pile of charred wood and twisted metal. The smell of gasoline hung heavy in the morning air, and my heart shattered as I imagined Emma's reaction when she discovered she couldn't get into school. The fire department had already extinguished the blaze, but the damage was complete. Years of community effort and thousands of dollars in donations had been reduced to ash and rubble in a matter of minutes. As I began my official investigation, I could see this was no accident. The burn patterns were too clean, too deliberate. Someone had poured accelerant in specific locations and ignited it methodically. This was a calculated act of destruction targeting disabled children's access to education. I was photographing the evidence and collecting samples when I heard that familiar, grating voice approaching from the parking lot. Well, what do we have here? Margaret called out cheerfully as she climbed out of her silver Mercedes. Looks like that eyesore finally got taken care of. What a wonderful improvement to the neighborhood. The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually taking photos with her phone, clearly planning to document her victory for the HOA newsletter. The woman had committed arson and was now celebrating at the crime scene. Such a shame about the accident, she continued loudly, making sure the gathering crowd of parents and school staff could hear her fake sympathy. But honestly, it was bound to happen eventually. Old wooden structures like that are such fire hazards. The school board should be thanking whoever did this for preventing a real tragedy. Principal Martinez stared at her in horror. Mrs. Whitfield, children relied on that ramp to access education. How can you possibly be celebrating this destruction? Oh please, Margaret waved dismissively, adjusting her perfectly applied makeup. There are plenty of other schools with proper facilities. Those children can go somewhere more appropriate for their needs. Riverside Elementary is supposed to be a quality institution, not a special needs facility. Several parents gasped at her callousness, but Margaret was on a roll now, her mask of respectability completely dropped. This neighborhood has standards, she declared proudly. We didn't work hard to build an elite community just to have it turned into some kind of disability charity case. Property values matter, and sometimes you have to take decisive action to protect your investments. That's when I stepped forward, my badge and identification ready. Ma'am, I'm Fire Marshal Johnson, and this is an active arson investigation. I'm going to need you to step away from the crime scene. The color drained from Margaret's face as she realized who I was. The same man she'd threatened just yesterday, the father of the disabled child she'd targeted with her hatred. Fire Marshal? She stammered, her phone slipping in her suddenly sweaty hands. You're that man from yesterday. The one with the wheelchair girl. That's right, I said calmly, pulling out my investigation kit. The father of the defective child you said didn't belong in this neighborhood. The same child who now can't access her school because someone burned down her ramp. Margaret's panic was palpable, but her arrogance ran too deep for her to stop talking. Now wait just a minute. You can't possibly think I had anything to do with this. This is obviously some kind of setup. You're targeting me because of our conversation yesterday. Nobody said you did anything, I replied professionally, carefully collecting samples of the accelerant residue. But it's interesting that you predicted this exact scenario yesterday. Almost like you knew it was going to happen. I was just making conversation. Pointing out safety hazards. Anyone could see that ramp was a fire waiting to happen. Safety hazards, I repeated, noting the distinctive chemical residue on the ground. And yet you called it an improvement when you arrived this morning. Most people would see the destruction of children's accessibility as a tragedy, not an improvement. Detective Sarah Chin arrived just as Margaret was digging her hole deeper. Marshal Johnson, what do we have here? Arson targeting disability accommodations, I replied, maintaining my professional demeanor despite my personal connection to the case. The suspect made specific threats against this structure yesterday in front of multiple witnesses, and arrived this morning celebrating the destruction while taking commemorative photos. I am not a suspect. Margaret shrieked, her carefully constructed facade cracking. This is harassment. You people are targeting me because I stand up for neighborhood standards. I'll have both your badges for this discrimination. But Detective Chen was already documenting the evidence, including the accelerant residue on Margaret's designer shoes, the same distinctive chemical signature we'd found throughout the burn site. Ma'am, based on the evidence we're collecting and your statements this morning, I'm going to need to read you your rights, Detective Chen said calmly. Rights? I don't need my rights read. I know my rights. I'm the president of the Sunny Meadows HOA. My husband is Thomas Whitfield of Whitfield, Patterson and Associates. You can't treat me like some common criminal. Everyone gets the same treatment under the law, I said firmly. Wealth and social status don't put you above it. But Margaret's panic was turning into rage, and in her fury she made the biggest mistake of her life. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I poured gasoline on that hideous ramp and lit it up. And I'm glad I did it. This neighborhood was going downhill fast with all these special accommodations popping up everywhere. Someone had to take action to preserve our property values and community standards. The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Detective Chen's handcuffs clicking shut around Margaret's wrists. Margaret Whitfield, you're under arrest for first-degree arson, destruction of public property, hate crime enhancement for targeting disabled individuals, and making terroristic threats. As they read her the complete list of charges, Margaret's entitled mask finally cracked completely. You can't do this to me. I'm important. I know people. I have connections. That little freak and her family ruined everything. They don't belong in our neighborhood. Even as she was being arrested, she couldn't stop herself from attacking my innocent daughter. The woman's hatred ran so deep that not even the prospect of prison could make her show an ounce of remorse. But Margaret's nightmare was just beginning. The story exploded across social media within hours. Someone had recorded her confession on their phone, and the video of a wealthy HOA president admitting to arson against disabled children's school access went viral immediately. #JusticeForEmma began trending, with millions of people expressing outrage at Margaret's cruelty. The local news picked up the story, then national outlets. Margaret's carefully curated social media profiles became the target of internet investigators who documented years of entitled behavior, racist comments, and complaints about undesirable elements in her neighborhood. Her own HOA board held an emergency meeting that evening and unanimously voted to remove her from all positions. Her neighbors, horrified by the national attention and ashamed to be associated with her actions, started a petition to have her permanently banned from Sunny Meadows community events. The legal consequences were swift and severe. The district attorney, facing intense public pressure, filed the maximum charges possible. Margaret's bail was set at $250,000, and when she couldn't make it immediately, she spent 3 days in county jail, a preview of her future accommodations. Her husband Thomas, facing pressure from his law firm partners and humiliated by the national scandal, quietly filed for divorce and moved out of their shared home. Her adult children, mortified by their mother's actions, issued public statements distancing themselves from her behavior. But the most beautiful response came from the community itself. Within 48 hours of Margaret's arrest, donations began pouring in from across the country. Parents of disabled children, disability rights advocates, and ordinary people touched by Emma's story sent money to rebuild the ramp. Local contractors volunteered their time and materials. Architects offered to design something even better than what had been destroyed. The school district established the Emma Johnson Accessibility Fund to ensure that no disabled child would ever face barriers to education in our community. The fund grew to over $100,000 in its first week. 3 months later, Margaret Whitfield was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, ordered to pay full restitution for the damage plus punitive fines totaling $75,000. The judge, clearly disgusted by her lack of remorse, added community service requirements specifically focused on disability advocacy work upon her release. Mrs. Whitfield, Judge Harrison said during sentencing, "Your actions represent the worst of human nature, targeting innocent children because of their disabilities, destroying community property out of spite, and showing not 1 ounce of remorse for the pain you've caused. This sentence reflects not just the crime you committed, but the hatred that motivated it." Margaret's properties were seized to pay the restitution, forcing her to lose the houses she'd been so proud of. Her social standing evaporated, her marriage ended, and her reputation was permanently destroyed. But the sweetest justice came 6 months later at the dedication of the new accessibility complex. The community had built something far more beautiful than what Margaret had destroyed. The new accessibility ramp featured decorative stonework, integrated planters, covered areas for weather protection, and artistic elements that made it a genuine improvement to the school's appearance. Local artists had created a beautiful mural celebrating inclusion and accessibility. More than that, the school had added accessible playground equipment, sensory gardens, and quiet spaces designed for children with different needs. What had started as the replacement of one ramp had become a complete transformation of the school into a model of inclusive design. Emma, along with her friends Marcus and Sophia who also used mobility aids, were given the honor of being the first to use the new facilities. As I watched my daughter roll up that beautiful pathway with the biggest smile on her face, surrounded by cheering classmates and supportive community members, I felt that justice had truly been served. "Daddy," Emma said as she reached the top of the ramp, turning around to wave at the crowd, "it's even more beautiful than before. And look, there are flowers everywhere." "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, my voice thick with emotion as I looked at the dozens of community members who had gathered to celebrate inclusion and accessibility. Sometimes when bad people try to tear things down, good people build something even better. The dedication plaque at the base of the ramp reads, "The Emma Johnson Accessibility Complex, built with love by a community that refuses to let hatred win. Every child deserves equal access to their dreams." Margaret Whitfield thought she could destroy my daughter's access to education with gasoline and matches. What she actually did was inspire an entire community to create something more beautiful, inclusive, and permanent than ever before. Her act of hatred became the catalyst for positive change that will benefit disabled children for generations to come. And every morning when I drop Emma off at school and watch her confidently navigate those beautiful accessible pathways, surrounded by friends who accept and include her without question, I'm reminded that there are far more good people in this world than bad ones. Margaret learned the hard way that when you target a fire marshal's disabled daughter, you're not just committing arson, you're igniting a community's passion for justice and inclusion. The woman who thought she was above the law because of her money and social connections discovered that nobody, absolutely nobody, gets away with targeting innocent children. Margaret's hatred burned bright for one morning, but the love and support of an entire community has been shining ever since, creating light where she tried to bring darkness, and building up where she tried to tear down.